tough one is when you are 0-1 and then you drop that second one and you're 0-2. Now things start. It's still a long way to go, but things start to tighten up a little bit.
Yeah.
So I think winning that second week is. I always felt like that was better than winning the first week. To be honest with you, not that you don't want to win both of them.
Welcome to Coach. I'm Michael Lombardi. This is Patricia, and of course, this is Coach Belichick. We're excited to have you join us on the Coach Podcast, and we'd like to start this week off, Coach, with Week 1 reaction, expectation. Everybody talks about don't overreact in Week 1. You got to be careful, but we know fans. They're going to overreact. And we also know fans are seldom right, but never uncertain. But John Fanta, I think, captured America's opinion of watching the Cleveland Browns. We were in Cleveland. We've
seen this Cleveland. Yes, we've seen the Cleveland fans.
Yeah, we've seen that. Matt, you've been in Detroit. You know how that goes, right? I mean, they're passionate. Let's play the tape for America to see John Fanta at his finest.
The only thing that's nice right now is the sun that's shining. It shouldn't be. That was utterly embarrassing, pathetic, disgraceful, shameful. You gave that guy under center $230 million fully guaranteed. $230 million fully guaranteed. He's not great. He's not good. He's not even average. Right now, I put him on par with Bryce Young or Daniel Jones. He can go stand in line with them. Rip the Band-Aid off before it's too late, because the rest of that locker room knows it. Deshaun Watson's done. That first half against Dallas was an utter joke. I'm tired of hearing about rust. I'm tired of hearing excuses. I'm tired of hearing that the two-time NFL Coach of the Year, it's all his fault. Folks, he can't play. It ain't happening. Accept reality. I'm ticked.
What do you say to that?
Well, there's 16 cities that have fans like that, Matt. And I think, to me, let's not get into the Deshaun Watson discussion or else we'll be here forever. But the passion that he exhibits in that, I mean, you felt that. I mean, we've all had games where we start the season out and we go, uh-oh, that ain't going to work.
Yeah, no doubt. We've had some historic ones that we've all that we all know about coming out of Kansas City, going out there in 2014. And we had that in previous years, trying to play those guys in Week 1. And it's a disaster after that happens. You can't do anything. Cleveland I love because, you tell the stories. You guys tell the stories of the dog pound back in the day and the passion and the mass and everybody in the end zone and the biscuits being thrown. And, you just got to love the fans and how much they just love that team. And obviously disappointed with Week 1 for, the Cleveland fans. But we know it's a long season. We know things change. But like you mentioned earlier, Mike, and Coach, expectations Week 1, going into Week 2, certainly things can change, real quick. When you have those games like that they had in Cleveland, you just really can't wait to get to the next Sunday. I think that's all you're trying to do is all right, let's just go play. We can just play as soon as possible and just get going.
I mean, you've had a lot of these, right? You've had great ones and bad ones. I mean, what was your mindset after a bad one?
Like the 31-0 loss to Buffalo in 2003.
But since you brought it up, I didn't want to bring it up.
Yeah, that was the day before the world came to an end.
Yes, I remember the worldwide leader had announced your death. Yes, I know that.
Oh, man, that was but you know what? It's a long season. And I think whatever happens in Week 1, you pick up the pieces. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're not. You pick up the pieces, you have a lot of things to work on, and you commit as a team to get better. And each individual player and coach needs to get better too. I mean, don't forget about the coaches. Coaches haven't coached in 6 months. I mean, it's preseason, you'll get those same situations. Practice is practice. Those real-time game decisions, that's part of coaching, getting into the right groove and making good decisions, as well as the players. So I think everybody's got a lot to work on after Week 1.
Yeah, like we saw last night, the Jets, we were taping this on Tuesday afternoon, the Jets went out to San Francisco with high hopes, right? They go out there and they basically get run off the field by Kyle Shanahan's run game. And Robert Saleh comes back and says 0-1 feels a hell of a lot better today than 1-0 does without Aaron Rodgers. So I don't know, is that mindset the right approach?
Well, as I said, I think everybody has a lot to work on. And so whoever you have, you have. Whoever you don't have, you don't have. We saw a lot of injuries in Week 1, probably about 30 or so players that got hurt, and so these teams are going to have to already make some roster adjustments, going into week 2, whether it's the Rams on the offensive line, Tampa Bay in the secondary. Everybody's got things they need to work on, and they come in different, shapes and sizes, and so there's just you got to roll up your sleeves and get back to work.
Now, on Tuesday, when you go in that meeting room and talk to the team, after one of those bad losses, did you have a sense of confidence? What is the emotion coming back at you?
Yeah, and I think you're trying to read the room, and you've obviously probably already talked to your leaders at that point, your captains, and, I think you're leaning on those guys because those guys are the ones that are having the conversations in the locker room and getting the true feelings of where everybody's at, and it just depends on how that first game goes. What kind of loss was it? Obviously, all losses aren't great, but were you out there competing and you're in it and you just have, some things to fine tune and get better? Or, is it like, all right, we got a lot of work to do and how's the team feel? But really leaning on those veteran players that have been around or those strong leaders in your locker room to, pull the team together and say, hey, listen, this is a process. We've got to get better. We've got to do more, maybe, whatever we got to change, look at and go forward from there. But I mean, I even remember, in 2008, we obviously, the first game of the year wasn't great. Our quarterback gets knocked out and, coach has got to walk in there the next day and, walked in with a football, walked over to Matt Castle, handed it to him, said, it's your ball. We got to go. And there really is no choice. Like, we have to go. We have to get that mindset. We got to go out there and play next week and, put that, learn from it, put it behind us. We've buried some shoes. We've buried some jerseys. We've tried to do everything to get rid of some of those losses that we've had early in the year, but I thought that was a great one where you just kind of walked in with, because that's a big change, right? So you're starting quarterback, you got a situation there. I think the whole team is waiting to see, okay, what are we going to do? And with as much confidence as you had, just walked in, handed the ball to Castle and said, we're going, and that was it.
Yeah,
Mike, my first year in the league was a really interesting situation. We went to training camp on July 5th in 1975 with the Baltimore Colts, and our opening game was September 21st against the Bears. We played really good against the Bears, beat them 35-7. Peyton had negative yards. That was his rookie year. And we got off to a great start, and it validated training camp. It was like, you know what? All the hard work we put in training camp, it paid off. We played good. We were in good condition. We won. And then we lost the next 4 games. And now we're 1-4. And that was kind of a crisis moment. And things turned around at that point, and we won the last 9, went 10-4, ended up losing to Pittsburgh, eventual Super Bowl champions in the playoffs. But that week 1 validated training camp. So I think when you win, there's a lot of validation there. When you lose that first game, no matter how you lose it, it's kind of like, we got to do more. It wasn't quite good enough. Maybe we didn't work hard enough. Maybe we evaluated certain things. But I think the real crisis for the team is going to come sometime during the season.
Yeah.
It might be week 5, it might be week 10, it might be week 13. But it's going to come later on in the season. I don't think it needs to be a crisis now, although in some places it probably is.
Yeah, right. I thought one of the best stories after Matt mentioned the 2008 season when Brady gets hurt is you had 2 quarterbacks come in for a workout that Monday just to get your emergency list. You never anticipated Brady was going to get injured. And before they could even get to the building, you sent them home because you wanted to send a message to the team that Matt Castle was our guy, that you weren't out there looking for another quarterback.
Right. Matt had put in 3 hard years of work, had really put himself into a position to be a good quarterback. He just wasn't better than Brady. And then when Tom got hurt, unfortunately, in 2008, that was Matt's chance. And, I think at that point he really deserved the opportunity. He went on to lead us to 11 wins that year. So it was he validated, the hard work and training that he had put in and pushed Tom to be better. And Tom pushed him to be better. And in the end, similar to the Trent Green, Kurt Warner situation when the Rams won the Super Bowl.
I was at that game.
That was another one that the season was over when Trent Green got hurt. Rams ended up winning the Super Bowl with Kurt Warner.
I can remember we were playing him in the old St. Louis Dome there, and I'm looking at the program. Who the hell is this guy coming in? I've even heard him before. His name's Kurt Warner. Oh, God. Next thing you know, he completed 8 passes in a row, and Al Davis was like, who is that guy? And then all of a sudden they go on to do it. So I think, to me, it'll be interesting. If Deshaun Watson plays better and the Browns beat Jacksonville, I wonder if John Fanta will post another video about how happy he is with all the decisions. What do you guys think?
It will. It'll be the highs and lows. We know that's how it is every single week. And, that's what you love about it. You ride and die with your team for sure and take those high moments and hate the low moments and all of it. I think one of the things that, Coach obviously instilled in the team for us, even going back to like the 2014, 13, some of the years that didn't start off so great, we just put a timeline on the season so that we kind of tried to eliminate the panic, right? Hey, at this marker of the season, we're trying to figure things out. So the month of September, we're learning our team. What do we do well? What do we not do well? Where do we got to improve? We get to October, we really try to improve on those things that we're not doing well and start to become a better team. Try to put that Thanksgiving marker in there to like, hey, can we be our best by Thanksgiving to get ready to push and get ready for postseason? And, when you kind of break the season down like that, I think from a team standpoint, certainly not outside the building, but inside the building, Coach, you did a great job of just really keeping everybody calm early on in the year. Let's just focus on the process. Let's just try to get better. Let's identify what we need to improve on. Let's identify what we do well, and how we can win, and then go from there and see if that's what helps us get better week to week and, keeps that goal in the forefront.
Yeah, I think that really, and Mike, you and I have had this conversation many times. Matt, you and I have too. I think the biggest thing is don't kid yourself. Come in after week one and identify the problems. These are the problems. This is what we got to fix. Let's, I think you can really make a mistake saying, well, everything's okay here when it really isn't. Well, eventually 3 or 4 weeks later, you're going to really find out that it isn't. If it's not okay, then what can we do to address it? Maybe we can work around it, try to push the, stay away from that area that's not a strength for us, whatever it happens to be, play less man-to-man coverage or get the ball out quicker on pass, but whatever it happens to be, figure out a way to address the problem rather than ignore it and say, well, we're going to be okay. If you're going to be okay, then you better be okay. If you're not, then you better figure out a way to work around and solve the problem.
Green Bay loses Jordan Love maybe for 4 weeks, 6 weeks, but that's a different turnaround. Now Malik Willis comes in. What was going through your mind? I know you had great hopes for Brady, and he looked good in practice, but when Bledsoe goes down and you put Brady in there, the season wasn't going great at that point, and then all of a sudden it turned around. Not in the first week. It wasn't a Hollywood story, but eventually it did. What was your mindset during that?
Really just, I told Tom the biggest thing is, look, we have a good defense and we're pretty good in the kicking game. Let's just don't go out there and lose the game. Don't turn the ball over. We'll get what we can get. We got Troy Brown. We got Antoine Smith. We'll try to keep the games competitive and keep it close. Don't turn the ball over. And that third week we beat the Colts and, had a couple turnovers, pick sixes, returned, and had some good field position for the offense, took advantage of it and got a big win. And that really rebuilt the confidence of the team. Now, we lost, 4 other games after that. I mean, it wasn't like we were arrived or anything, but I think once the team feels like it's competitive, and that's the big thing, you want the team to feel like every week we got a chance to win.
Right.
And if they feel like that, then, okay, you at least you're in position to win. Now you have to go out and play well enough. But when the team has a mindset and they go into the game like, well, we just can't win, then you're really in trouble.
Yeah, I think that's the hard part, and that's where you have to develop the confidence without evidence, right?
Yeah, no doubt. And I think, one of the things, we look at this week, and it's the first game of the year, and it's the first game speed. This is like you saw a real game speed on the field. Special teams, that's totally different. You're trying to get those reps in practice, but you never really get game speed in practice and special teams for sure. And then in the preseason, some of those guys are, trying to evaluate your roster. So now you're actually out there in a competitive situation with special teams. And, I think that'll improve as we go through, to this week. And tackling for sure, the first time a lot of these guys are seeing that game speed and trying to tackle. So those fundamentals will improve. And, Bill and I talk about all the time, like the improvement from week 1 to week 2, I think from the fundamental standpoint, that'll be big to see which teams, some of those plays that kind of hurt the teams this past week, those will get fixed. And then they won't hurt those teams, and that'll help them to win week 2. And they'll continue that way as they go through the season.
Yeah, I think every team is going to improve from week 1 to week 2. It's the rate of improvement.
Yeah.
What team improves more than another team? And we won't know that until the following Sunday. But, everybody's going to get better. But look, there's only 17 games. If you only get better 17 times, that's just not enough. You got to use Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday to continue to improve through the week. If everybody can improve 5-10%, every coach, every player, then that rising tide will lift the boats up to, a much higher point.
I think it's time to look back on week 1. You used to say this all the time. Great teams can run the ball when they need to run it. Great defenses can stop the run when they have to stop it. And I think when we watch week 1, there were very few games where we saw teams being able to execute and demand and be precise with what they had to throw the football. What were your thoughts about the passing game in week 1, taken outside the rookie quarterbacks?
Well, pretty inconsistent, really. I think when you look at some of the numbers are down. Many fewer touchdown passes than what we normally see in week 1. Yards downfield passing, that was low too. The quarterback ratings were generally low, with the exception of a few quarterbacks who had pretty good days. We only had 2 300-yard passers the whole weekend.
Yeah. Yeah, that was surprising. And Matt, when you watch the tape from a former head coach and defensive coordinator, why do you think that the passing is behind? Is it because of practice and lack of execution with training camp, or is it just defense getting better?
Yeah, it's probably a combination of both in depending on the situation. But I think to Coach's point, I think that was the least amount of 300-yard quarterbacks, since 2010. So it's, obviously this change as we're kind of with the passing game, just the production, just wasn't there this weekend. I think the defenses are a little bit more advanced, maybe to start the season. The offenses are trying to get in their rhythm, new pieces going in. And again, first time out there on the field, all working together as a unit. I think that the defense just kind of had a little bit of a jump on it. You see a lot more shorter passes from the quarterback, trying to ball control. That's just kind of in the offensive kind of style right now. So the amount of yards downfield is not, the same. It's almost like when we look at it, it's like really short passes, like everything within 5 to 6 yards, or, it's downfield like
Just
plus
chuck it.
25
Yeah.
to 30, and these guys are getting out of the pocket. The intermediate routes, you see the more advanced offenses, Kansas City, Philly, things like that, throwing the in cuts, like you really see those inside, intermediate routes. Those were completed this weekend. But really for the majority of everybody else, it's, getting the backs out of the backfield. We saw a lot of halfback releases, a lot of wheel routes, by the backs getting out that turned into explosive plays. These guys are so good with the ball in their hands, they just want to get it to them right now so they can, try to get the yards after catch. But I just think that ball is coming out so quick from the quarterback, and the defenses are sitting there and they're just driving and tackling and keeping everything in front of them in those situations. But there was some plays in the defense this past weekend where the ball got behind them. They cut some guys loose through the defense, and now they had those big plays. So it was really like the passing game was really interesting. It was short, and then there were some giant ones downfield, and not a lot in between, I would say, yet, in the offensive systems.
What were your thoughts on offensive line play in week one?
Well, I think the lack of fundamentals and continuity was showed up. There was some missed assignments on games and twists, blitz pickup, things like that. There were some free runners on the quarterbacks. A lot of times quarterbacks just heave the ball and then get sacked. I don't think it was an inordinate amount of sacks, but there was a lot of pressure on some of those guys. And I think the offensive lines will become more cohesive, as the season goes on. But look, you got to protect for the quarterback from day one. So if you don't, then you lose your quarterback. So I think just the overall timing, execution offensively, I'm sure we'll get a lot better this week, which it needs to.
Yeah, you talk about using September as kind of an extension of preseason, and you kind of use it, and people think when you say that, you don't want to win the game, you're just trying to look at the team, but you want to win the game.
Of course.
But you also want to learn a lot about your team. And I think there's a lot of teams like Dallas, for example, they go into Cleveland and dominate Cleveland's offense.
Well, nobody's better from playing ahead than Dallas
right,
is.
yeah.
They can control the ball offensively, and they can play from ahead on defense with their pass rush and their coverage players. So that really plays into their hands. We'll see what happens when they get into a tighter game. Maybe they have to play from behind. Whether it goes that way. Last year, it didn't for them.
Yeah, aren't you? I mean, how good is their kicking game, though? They can make kicks from outside the moon, right?
Yeah.
And then don't ever kick the ball to Turbin. I mean, like, why anybody would kick the ball to Turbin? It would be like, I know you would kick it out of bounds to Turbin.
Oh,
He'd
my
have to
God.
catch it in the stands if he was going to catch it, right?
Yeah, he'd have to bat it back onto the field to play. No, look, I think you got to give Dallas's personnel department, Stephen Jones, the personnel department, a lot of credit. Look, the only way you can afford CeeDee Lamb, Dak Prescott, some of their other high-priced players is you've got to find good players that don't cost too much. They've done it with their kicker, Aubrey. They've done it with their returner, Turpin. Those guys are two of the best guys in the league, didn't cost anything. Another thing they got this year was like another free draft choice. Overshawn had 11 tackles in the game. He didn't even play last year because he tore his ACL. So he came back in his second year without playing a snap last year. Led the league in tackle, or led the team in tackles against the Browns. So really a great job by Dallas of finding those players to come in and supplement some of their high-priced players so they can have a solid team all the way around.
Yeah. And I would say, Coach, to that point, when you find players like that actually score points, and obviously, the score is the biggest thing. So with their kicking game, Dallas, I thought that was so impressive. You guys know, obviously, being in Cleveland, you're kicking in grass, you're kicking outside.
Oh my God,
those
that's
aren't
not
easy
easy.
kicks.
No.
Now, you go to Dallas, and, defensively, you're playing on half a field. Like, literally, they get the ball at the 30-yard line, they gain 20 yards, and it's 3 points because it's such a weapon. But when you can find those guys that, you get in that contract, that price range, that score, like, they have, and to do it in Cleveland with another plus 50 yard field goal, which we have a lot of those right now. It's just, that's such a weapon for them, and that's what gives them that playing from ahead mentality.
Was that 22 field goals over 50 yards or something like that this weekend? I mean, it was a lot. These guys aren't missing many. It's not like they're trying, just trying it every time they get there. When they get in range, they have enough confidence, and the kickers are accurate enough to, validate the coach, and they've been putting them through.
Yeah, I mean, the success rate was that of extra points this week before the extra point got moved. That's how good they were kicking, And so as a defensive coach, and both of you should talk about this, what is your mindset knowing that kicker can make it? I mean, Houston kicks 3 kicks over 50 yards, and the Colts lose by 2. Typically, when you would line up for a 50-yard kick, you say, oh, we got a 50-50 chance this guy ain't going to make it, but boom, that went right through the middle. What's your mindset on the calls? Does it change how you look at it, that we got to knock them out of field goal range, or is it you're just going to make sure you don't give up an explosive play?
Well, I think once they're in field goal range, you're just trying to keep them out of the end zone.
Right.
Like, they're already in range. Now, if they go backwards on a penalty, or maybe if you can knock them back on a blitz or something. But, I mean, that's kind of hard to do. Certainly you try to do it, but that doesn't happen too often. I think once they're in range, then, you got to try to hold them to 3, unless it's the end of the game situation where it's critical. But in normal parts of the game, until they get into that range, then you've got to be very, very conscious of keeping them out of field goal range. But I would say when you get into that gray area there between, call it the midfield and the plus 36, 7 yard line, somewhere in there, depending on the kicker's range, you got a lot of 4-down situations. And so what these coaches will do now offensively is 3rd down, run the ball, get the 4th and 2, and then keep the offense on the field in 4th and 2, instead of trying to end up 4th and 6, 4th and 7, where they have to punt it in the plus 50. But speaking of the kicking game, though, I mean, this was a wild week on special teams, like it usually is in week 1. We saw block punts, punt returns, kickoff returns, some other, I would say, missed plays, ball handling plays. It was a lot of interesting things in the kicking game this week.
Yeah, it really was. Brian Callahan, the head coach of the Tennessee Titans, said, Matt, that if they would have punted the ball on 1st down, they probably would have beaten the Bears. Now, they also had a punt block, so I'm not sure that's the right thing to say. But, I mean, when you watch the tape, his team's sitting right there, and they just make, as Bill would say, we didn't deserve to win because we gave the game away.
Yeah, and, there's, just like Coach mentioned, and like you're saying, there's a lot of lost yardage that happened this weekend, too, where, the punt, you got a good opportunity to down the ball inside the 10-yard line and put your opponent on a longer field, which now we need because of the field goal range of these guys.
Absolutely.
And, you get down there, mishandle it, kick it in the end zone, and now the ball's coming out on a touchback situation, and, you're right back into that short field to, back to field goal range. Those are huge plays, when you can pin your opponent inside the 10, make them go longer on the drive. And to the point of the question you were asking earlier, defensively, okay, how am I defending this? I got a short field. Once I get into this range, depending on where they are in the game, we've got to be tighter for the field goal. That affects your end of the game, end of the half defense. A lot of times on the plus or in the minus territory, maybe a little bit more zone. You're playing the clock. You're trying to tackle, trying to tighten the coverage up as it gets by midfield. Well, shoot, midfield is already field goal range, so maybe you got to tighten up your coverage a little bit sooner. And then to that point, it really, once you cross midfield, I think, coaches, we know those 3rd and long situations, those become a question because, all right, you're maybe not in field goal range, so the 1st down, obviously, you're trying to prevent that, but if it's 3rd and 15 and you give them 5 yards, now they're in field goal range.
Yeah.
So you got to move up your whole process there, and you got to get tighter coverage to not let them get in field goal range and still not let them get the 1st down. So you got a little bit of a bind there defensively to try to figure out how we gonna play that situation.
Yeah, I think another interesting thing from this past weekend was just the ball security.
Yeah.
You look at 2 teams. Cincinnati fumbles going into the end zone, lose by 6. Jacksonville fumbles going into the end zone, lose a close game. I think if those teams would have just held on to the ball and been able to get into the end zone when it looked like they were going to score anyway and didn't get the ball knocked out, that those games could have turned out differently. So I think ball security is a great lesson, not just for this week, but going forward for all guys that handle the ball. You just got to take care of that ball around the goal line. Teams are getting better and better. Players are getting better and better at punching out. We saw what Wagner did in the game. Had a great punch out in the Monday night game. So, these guys are good. Taking care of the football is still number 1 on my list after points.
Yeah, you used to say it all the time, Coach. I used to love this saying, you'd walk in, you'd be like, with the ball, like, hey, when you carry the ball, you carry the fate of the entire organization in your hands. And it was just, that's what it is. You're going in to score, like that's a win, or the ball security, like that's just the importance of making sure that you handle the ball.
My 7-year-old grandson Dominic, he knows it already. Ball security is job security.
No doubt.
You ask him that question, and he knows it. I mean, he's primed to give you that answer. So he's been well trained on that. Let's talk about penalties.
Ramondre Stevenson has heard that 1,000 times.
Yeah, no doubt.
Ball security.
It was ball security and north and south. Those are the two
Yes.
things we finally got Ramondre going on, and he's turned into a.
You know what, Mike? It reminds me. Growing up as a kid, you only have one car in your family.
Right.
And when your dad gives you the keys to the car to go out, to go do whatever you're going to do or go out at night or whatever, that car has got to come back full of gas in one piece because he's got to take it to work tomorrow.
Yeah.
And when he gives you the keys to the car, that's a lot of responsibility. It's kind of like handing the guy the ball. You better have it at the end of the play.
That's right.
Don't give it away. You screw up that car, you've screwed up our whole family.
Yeah, no question.
And
it tilts it, and missed field goals count too. We talked about that before the show started. I mean, this whole idea that we don't think a missed field goal. I mean, Washington misses 2 field goals. Cade York misses 2 field goals. And they didn't bring the punter. They didn't bring him home with them.
Gone.
And in this light, as a personnel guy, it used to be don't pay the kicker. You can always find a kicker. But now with these guys making 50-yard kicks at like a rapid rate, if you don't have one, you don't have a closer in base. It's like not having a closer in baseball.
Yeah, the games are so close. Those 3 points are,
they just matter.
They decide half the games in the league.
Yeah, I think we saw that in Jacksonville. Doug Peterson went for it on 4th down at his own 30. I'm not sure what he was thinking about or what he was even thinking, but then he got a break because Miami's in prime field goal range, and then that was one of the few kicks that they missed. So they kind of skirted the issue. But then, of course, when ATN fumbled, what happens the next play?
Yeah.
Tyreek Hill's going 80 yards, at 20 miles an hour. So I want to talk about officiating. What was your thoughts on the officiating? I know that we knew it was going to get tighter, but man, did it really get tight?
I think it went about the way we all thought it would go. A lot of calls in week 1 of the season, just like there were last year, a lot of calls in week 1 of the season. And then it settles down as the season goes along, and there are fewer calls. And then at the end of the year, as we saw in the playoffs last year, hard to get a call.
Yeah.
They're letting the players play. So I think that some of the line of scrimmage calls, not enough guys on the line of scrimmage and motion and illegal formation, stuff like that, got called a lot tighter than I've seen it called in a while. And some of that the players probably need to tighten up their alignments and make it a little bit cleaner. But I think the officials, look, you don't sign the TV contract the NFL signed to see false starts and illegal formations and offensive pass interference. Nobody wants to see that. They want to see the offense scoring points.
Yeah, no question. What do you think, Matt?
Yeah, I agree. I think that's also part of the, an improvement as you go through the weeks, right? So they'll go back, they'll look at the tape, say, hey, we got to tighten up the formations here. We got to eliminate the pre-snap penalties. Let the offense stay on track and be more efficient, which I think will increase the pass game and the production and all that stuff that we're talking about with the offense. But I think it's kind of the same philosophy. If you're teaching a class, if you're a teacher, don't let them see a smile till Thanksgiving, and they're going to throw the penalties early. They're going to make you aware of that. They're going to be out there, keeping track of things, and eventually, it does loosen up a little bit. And, we start to track those guys and say, all right, we're going to play the game as do business as business is being done. And, hey, this is a real high offensive holding crew. Do a good job with your hands, or, this is going to be a pass penalty, a defensive pass penalty crew. Yeah. Do a better job with your hands. And so now you got a little bit of a coaching tip to tell your players, like, hey, be a little bit more disciplined in this area this week, be a little bit more disciplined in this area this week, and some of those penalties go away.
Yeah.
I think the big thing on the penalties, look, things are going to happen during the play that happen. That's football. Some of that you just got to live with. To me, the discipline on the team is eliminating pre-snap penalties and post-snap penalties.
Right.
Illegal formation, illegal motion, too many guys on the field, roughing the passer, personal fouls, hitting a guy out of bounds, all that type of stuff. You got to eliminate those.
Right.
And then you're going to have to live with some stuff during the play of holding or illegal contact, or whatever. So that's part of football. That's going to happen. But the pre-snap and post-snap, if you can eliminate those, then you probably have a much better you'll have a much better chance to win.
As you say all the time, don't go backwards. The overall, I thought conditioning wasn't. I know nobody loved to tell the team to go to the hill more than Coach did, right? So I thought conditioning wasn't very. You look at that. Rams were exhausted at the end of the Lions game.
Oh.
You could see
So were the
that.
Jets.
So were the Jets last night. The Jets looked like they were out of gas quickly. But overall, the conditioning of teams, what were your thoughts?
Well, look, I think it's a level playing field. I don't think, no team played more than the other one did in preseason or practiced more or, so it's all probably about the same. I think the conditioning levels are going to be a lot higher going forward, but it didn't look like it was an overriding factor. I think the biggest thing on conditioning was teams that use a lot of the substitution, like the Jets last few years. The Jets have brought those defensive linemen in waves. Let them play 4 plays, bring in a new group. Let them play 4 plays, bring in a new group. And they were pretty balanced. Like all of those guys could play pretty well. I think when you got into a situation where either that second group is a lot less than your first group, or you just got to leave your first group out there and they wear down, there's a difference in the level of play. And I think with some of the defensive line throughout the league, that until some of these younger guys get to be better players and gain a little bit more experience, I think you just got to be careful as a coach and as a defensive team, how much you rely on those guys to play, or do you leave your good guys out there and let them wear down, or do you put in guys who aren't ready to play and let them play to kind of keep everybody fresh? That can be a tough decision.
I was going to say, just off of that, give credit where credit is due in the conditioning factor. I mean, I thought Trent Williams went out and really he played unbelievable. He's dominant against the Jets front and got the edge, was able to run the ball, and he obviously did everything he could to get himself ready to go, and I thought that really showed on the positive side for him last night.
Absolutely.
Yeah, he clearly, I mean, they needed him, and he responded. I mean, he came back and saw it. I definitely feel like the conditioning, it wears you down, and if you don't practice it, I mean, if you're not playing in the games, those guys get tired at the end of the game, and you could feel it, and I think Detroit took advantage. Once they won that toss in overtime, they went right down the field and took advantage of it, and that line, you're getting Penny Sewell banging up against you. I mean, that's not an easy thing to do.
No. And, and as much as Kansas City, which I think Coach Reed does a great job with the conditioning and their long drives, and, what he does with his conditioning program is legendary and it's very good. But, you saw what happened to them at the end of the game, too. I mean, Baltimore gets the ball and walk it right down the field, and, they lose by a toenail. But that was an impressive drive for Baltimore to finish the game on the road.
Yeah, no question.
And to your point, Mike, I think give credit to Detroit now. I mean, they went with their strength, right? So Ben Johnson, the offensive line, let's just go right at him, go right down the field, and punch it in to win the game in that situation when you knew the Rams were still sitting in too high shell and they had a little bit of a light box, and Ben did a great job, and Hank Fraley, who coaches the offensive line, they just those guys do a great job up front, and
they were coming off the ball.
They were just coming off the ball and just moving the line of scrimmage, which is what you love. You love to see if you're on that side of it. Hate to see when you're on the defensive side.
No question.
Sure.
Well, not to look ahead, but it'll be interesting to see this week how it goes with Detroit and Tampa. Tampa has a good defensive line.
Yeah.
Detroit might have the best offensive line in the league. That's going to be a great matchup this week. We'll see. And I think as you go into week 2, you see different matchups. Some teams, you look at New Orleans had a big win against Carolina. I don't know, is New Orleans that good? Maybe Carolina's, they weren't very good last year. Are they the same team? I think it takes 2 or 3 weeks to kind of let things sort out here and see, good teams playing different matchups, how all that works out. There'll be some upsets every week like there always are.
Yeah, I mean, like there's no question. But I kind of felt like the teams that understood who they were early. I mean, clearly New England was not going to let Jacoby Brissett beat them, so they were going to run the football. And Cincinnati obviously didn't do a good enough job of making New England play left-handed, and that's why they start the season once again losing the opening game. Yeah,
it's kind of the same thing in Pittsburgh, right? Pittsburgh and Atlanta. Pittsburgh, don't turn the ball over, play good defense, keep the score down. I don't want to say win ugly, but win.
Win ugly.
And they did.
That's how they win. It's funny, Matt, when you look at Justin Fields' passing, right, all of his throws were outside the numbers. He never threw the ball inside the numbers. There's not one throw inside the number, and the reason is they didn't want Jesse Bates to beat him. They didn't want to take that turnover and make it a bad play, which you got to give Arthur Smith a lot of credit for that game plan, because that really worked out well. And when he needed to make a play against Atlanta's defense, he did. Yeah,
Arthur's a great coach, and I'm sure that was real good for him to be able to go have that win this past weekend. And to your point, I think Arthur does a great job of understanding his quarterbacks. What do they do well? Where can they put the ball? What do they read in coverage? Being able to run the ball to obviously take them off the hook on every so they don't have to go throw it every down. But understanding the defense, like where are their go-to guys or where are their impact players on defense, and how do I get the ball away from those guys so that we don't beat ourselves like Coach mentioned there in that situation. But I think Arthur did a great job.
He really did. And Justin Fields is going to start this week against Denver. They announced that today too. So Russell Wilson's not back. Let's talk rookie quarterbacks. I mean, there's so much fanfare about him, right? Everybody thought Caleb Williams was going to throw for 450 yards easily in the first half, right?
It was 50 yards, right?
Yeah, it was 50, right? I mean, we missed that one a little bit. But what were your thoughts overall on their play?
Well, I think all those guys, I'm sure, learned a lot in this first game. I thought that Jaden Daniels was able to do what he can do, which is run. He carried the ball a lot. He scrambled a lot, and he was very effective. I still think teams need to put a spy on him and keep him from running. But I'd say some of the other guys had some trouble, and just in general, the passing game overall in the league was down. But certainly the young quarterbacks all had their issues with it. Again, the big thing is just like you said, Michael, don't lose the game.
Yeah.
Don't go out there and lose the game. Give your defense a chance to win. Don't do what Will Levis did and toss a pick six and give the game away. And so between that and the kicking game, clean up the mistakes in the kicking game, get your good guys out there, make sure they know what they're doing, handle the ball. Don't get a punt block like Tennessee did. There's Chicago wins on a pick six and a block punt, but they count. You can't let those little things slide.
Yeah, no question. What were your thoughts of Caleb Williams? I know you were watching that tape upstairs.
Yeah, I think again Chicago's offense. I think they've got to get the passing game going. And they've got to be able to run the ball to not have to go back there and throw it every down. I think he's certainly going back, and I think he said it in his post-game press conference. A little bit more accuracy with some of those throws, take advantage of some of the receivers that he had open. And, I think they had one where they, dropped a touchdown in that situation too. So I think they're close. They're going to tighten those things up this week and hopefully, be more improved in the passing game. I think really the biggest question with Chicago has got to be up front, the protection. And Caleb Williams, he's running. He's athletic. He gets out. He has the one boot. He throws that thing. I mean, that's a laser downfield on the boot that he completes. But you just don't want your quarterback running for his life, all game long. Like, let him settle in the pocket and keep his eyes downfield. I think that's the biggest thing for young quarterbacks, and defensively, obviously, we like this, right? We want to see those eyes drop, right? So as soon as we start to see those young quarterbacks or whatever, veteran quarterbacks, once their eyes, you can see on their helmet, once their eyes start to drop down, they're looking at that rush. And now they're not seeing the coverage all the way through. Maybe one read to rush. And especially with young quarterbacks, like, keep their eyes downfield as long as possible and let them learn to read coverage, because as soon as they got to start getting to the rush, they're not paying attention to what's going down there. That's when the bad things happen for them.
Really, if Caleb had hit the guys that were open a couple times, they might have had close to 300 yards.
Yeah, they probably would have.
There were some guys open, just got to get the time in.
The game was going too fast. Didn't you feel like, he didn't have time to set his feet. He was throwing off balance and made himself really inaccurate.
There's a lot of pressure. You're right.
Yeah, no question. And then, Matt, I think you make a great point. When you watch New York Giants and Daniel Jones, I'm not sure Daniel Jones has recovered from all the hits he's taken in his career. David Carr started out in Houston and took a beating, and his eye level came down and never went back up. That happened to Kurt Warner. We had a chance to sign Kurt Warner when I was in Oakland, and he had just been playing, and his eye level was down. And remember, he went to the Giants, and he really didn't do anything at the Giants. In fact, then he went to Arizona, and his eye level came back up. I wonder, do you think Daniel Jones' eye level is going to come back up?
Well, we'll see over the next few weeks. They got a tough schedule coming up here, and I would say with the two inside rushers that Washington has, probably get challenged this week on that.
No question. And look, the one thing we talked earlier, and I wanted to mention this: when Minnesota was playing, they put the Dwight Freeney rule in. When Dexter Lawrence wasn't in the game, what do you think they were doing? It was clearly a call. Kevin O'Connell used the old Dwight Freeney rule and said, let's make sure we take care of Lawrence is out.
Yeah, pay attention to those substitutions. It goes both ways. We used to play Baltimore back in the day, and they'd have the big bodies in there, or Buffalo. As soon as those guys subbed out, it'd be like, run the ball. And they come back in, all right, throw it. And just you're playing that substitution game offensively to see who's in the game. And certainly with the dynamic pass rushers that are in the league right now, if those guys ever rotate out, man, you're trying to go. Shoot, last night with Mosley, he went out for a play. I'm like, oh, just run it, because he's going to destroy everything in the run game, and you're paying attention to that stuff on offense for sure.
Yeah, same thing with receivers. That top receiver, because that Buffalo blitz.
Yeah,
go get them.
Yeah.
How about the new coordinators, the older coordinators? It seemed like the guys who were coordinating have done it. Mike Zimmer's done it 150 years, right? It was like, even though he hadn't been in the league last year, it was no big deal. But some of the younger coordinators, Zach Robinson struggled in Atlanta. I mean, somebody might want to tell Zach we need to double that guy named T.J. Watt over here on every single play, because he could screw up the game. Just a thought. But what was your thoughts about the young coordinators and the coordinator as a continuity within the coordinator group?
Yeah, well, again, I think it's a little bit like rookie quarterbacks. Your first time calling or your early opportunities calling a game are different. I mean, they just are. We all learn from them. We all make a lot of mistakes doing that, but you eventually learn from it. But yeah, it's sometimes those fires can get hot.
Yeah.
And I think the teams with the experienced defenses, teams like New Orleans, certainly Dallas with Zimmer, but also the defensive players. New England, basically the whole defense is back from last year. Those teams can adjust, more easily, readily with the same system with similar coaching. And I think that showed up. They all played pretty well on defense.
Yeah.
Pittsburgh.
Yeah, no question. Pittsburgh. I mean, I think there is continuity offensively, too, when you can get into a rhythm. And having called the game, I mean, Zach Orr, 3 years as a coach, I mean, that's a tough challenge. You go against Andy Reid, national TV, everybody's watching, and, they gave up, 27 points in 26 minutes. It's not easy. It's easier Monday through Saturday, right?
Right, no doubt. And I think, again, anytime you play Andy Reid early in the year, you can be an experienced defensive coordinator. You're sweating that game for sure. And, I think it's just when you get in the game, you're like, okay, first quarter, you feel good. You feel like you got your adjustments. But those guys on the other sideline that have that experience like that, they're making adjustments. And if you're not staying in front of it and if you're not moving kind of one step ahead, you get to that end of the second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter, and it's coming like an avalanche. You just can't stop it. And, that's when you need those experienced guys on either side of the ball to kind of calm everything down on the sideline and just communicate. Sometimes that's all it is. Like, hey, we just got to do a better job communicating. Let's make sure we're, playing with good eye control, things like that. But that avalanche can come fast for sure.
Yeah. What are you looking forward to in week 2?
I would say just, a different matchups, right? Different matchups. Every team's got a different matchup, and we'll see how, some of these things now start to level out or not.
Right.
And then, of course, the home openers for these teams that played on the road. Like most of the teams played on the road, now they're coming back home. That'd be a good opportunity for some of them to go 2-0, or some of them to come back and get back to 500 and kind of get a restart on the season. So I think really week 2, I've always felt like that was more important than week 1. If you win week 1 and then you win week 2 and you're 2-0, I'm like,
now you got
something going. If you lose week 1 and you come back and win week 2, it's like, all right, well, we reset here. All right, now we can push forward. The tough one is when you are 0-1 and then you drop that second one and you're 0-2. Now things start. It's still a long way to go, but things start to tighten up a little bit.
Yeah.
And so I think winning that second week is. I always felt like that was better than winning the first week. To be honest with you, not that you don't want to win both of them.
Right, Matt. What are you looking forward to?
Yeah, definitely like to win both. I think I've been on the other side of that. It's not a fun Monday at all. I'm excited to see the adjustments that people make. From week 1 to week 2. Now that we've got good game tape on, and we're evaluating both your own players and your opponents to see those matchups and see how they're handled. I think you hit it. The start of everything we talked about, Mike, was hey, run the ball when you can run it. Stop the run when you can stop it. And that goes into like what we talked about all the time, and Bill get up in front of the team and talk about controlling the game, and control the game by running the ball, stopping the run, covering kicks, playing all 3 phases in that area tough. And, I think that's a good way to play week 1, and I think that's what the teams did. Okay, let's see if they open it up a little bit more in week 2. Let's see if we hit some of those big plays in the passing game. Let's see if those numbers go back up, along with the teams that are doing a good job of running the ball and controlling the game that way, to see how those adjustments play out in week 2. I think that'll be interesting.
Yeah, I think we'll see fewer penalties. I mean, I think the teams will tighten up some of the false starts and illegal formations and things like that. I think they'll tighten that up. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see more touchbacks, not less. I think the teams that touch back are going to continue to touch back. And I think a couple of teams that maybe are concerned about their coverage would just say, like, let's touch back it.
Yeah, I think that's right. And, the one thing you always used to talk about, there's 2 things in every game, who's in control and who's in the lead.
Yes.
And I think, to me,
they're not always the same.
They're not always. I know. I've heard that before many times. That was interesting because I thought when you watched the Houston-Indy game, Houston was always in control and they had the lead. But Indy, because of their big play strike ability, kind of gave themselves a chance. But when Houston needed to make a throw, we talked about this, the 3rd and 9 throw that Stroud makes.
Unbelievable.
Nico Collins.
And like you mentioned earlier, Mike, the time of possession for Houston just
40 to 20.
And listen, Mixon, that was unbelievable. Like, that was just a great effort. And I thought from the get-go, he came out and he just ran with an attitude that was beautiful. Like, for him to come out and just have that. And I think the team felt it. And they just, like you mentioned, they controlled it that way, and it carried them through the game.
It looked like 3 backs kind of had something to prove last week. Barkley, Aaron Jones, and Mixon.
No question.
And they did. They all had good days.
And all 3 of them were rejected by the team that they played for. They didn't want them. There might be something to that. I mean, when you get shrugged off and all of a sudden you want to prove it. I mean, I thought Mixon had no juice in his lower body. As an evaluator, I thought, oh, no. Cincinnati cuts him to sign Zach Moss. Aaron Jones, you and I, we all 3 of us agreed that Aaron Jones was the best. I don't understand that move, but they did it anyway. And then, of course, Barkley, just give me a chance to match that was never going to happen. That was never going to happen. I mean, we've been down that road. But I'm looking forward to the matchups too. But I do think that there's certain teams that are just better than other teams. San Francisco, obviously, is good. Kansas City, Detroit. It just seems like there's that cluster that they're going to be hard to beat.
Yeah. Well, and look, I think the Philly-Atlanta will be a big matchup. People are picking Atlanta to win the division, go to the Super Bowl and all that. They're 0-1 going into Philadelphia. Philadelphia would be a good challenge for them. It'll be interesting to see how this one goes Monday night.
Yeah, that'll be a fun game to watch. And you're going to be at that game, right?
I will. Love to be in Philly.
Yeah, there you go.
City of brotherly love. And they love me.
Well, that's it for Coach. Make sure you subscribe to our channel. Be here next week. We'll review week 2 for you.